Shiny Side Out with David Dunger and Mekhi. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. Take it away, guys.
Hey, everyone, and welcome back to another Shiny Side Out with Dave.
And Mekhi.
We're part of Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com. Join the chat room and join the show. Follow us on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook to get updates between shows, and check out our website for up-to-date guest information, guest bios, and previous shows. On tonight's show, we have Kerry Cassidy with us. We're going to be doing the listener top 5 questions. But first, the news.
Hey guys, we've got a couple of news items for you. They're a little strange. Well, so is our show, so that's okay. The first one, we put them in for fun. Recently, in fact, yesterday, this article was posted and in a magazine called Current Biology. And essentially, what it says is that dinosaur bodily emissions, not from the face, may have caused global warming. Okay, an analysis led by
not from the face. So where are those emissions coming from?
From the other end.
Oh,
right. I don't know if I can say the F word, so I'm not.
That's okay.
An analysis led by Dave Wilkinson of Liverpool John Moores University totes up the toots from the ancient plant-eating sauropods of the age of dinosaurs. So essentially, large dinosaurs which only ate plant matter. And they found that they likely produced even more methane than cows today. So methane is a greenhouse gas, if you will. And we can also use it for a whole bunch of other things, for example, to run alternative engines and whatnot. However, a simple mathematical model suggested that the microbes living in sauropod dinosaurs may have produced enough methane to have an important effect on the Mesozoic climate, said Wilkinson in a statement. You can look, you can have a look at that yourself. I'm posting the link up in the chat room. I thought we put it in here just to ground ourselves again in the whole dinosaur and the whole climate change debate. And I think we are reaching for straws now when we start talking about how dinosaur gas could have changed the climate back then. As you might hear from my tone, I'm not a strong believer in man-induced climate change. Anyway.
All right, well, I've got one news item just before we get on. There's just yesterday announced now what they call, I'm putting inverted commas, declared person centres, unquote, that haven't announced a location yet to be building these, but these are in Australia. But they're allocated $18 million to build the 2 centres. I'm trying to find the link for this, for the story, but it was broken last night on the television news. And their excuse for it was people who can't fit into prison. And they loosely described it as people who weren't intellectually able to fit into prison. And I said, well, what about criminally? We should be building more prisons.
No, absolutely. But Dave, you and I, we should both be in prison. You know that. It's true. We have all kinds of independent thoughts. It's just not good enough, is it?
Absolutely.
We've got a couple more,
yep.
if you like. So the next one is a bit more serious. It's about Russia. And this is actually a headline. I'm reading out the headline now. Russia threatens to destroy U.S. missile shield in Europe. All right, that's the headline from Xinhua Newsnet, which is the Chinese newspaper, or in English language. And this is what it said. Russia is is ready to destroy U.S. missile defense facilities in Europe if Moscow considers them as real threats. Defense Minister Anatoly Serdyukov warned on Friday. The deployment raises our certain concerns. Therefore, we will destroy the missile defense, Serdyukov told reporters in Russia's Black Sea resort of Sochi. Okay. Moscow has long opposed the deployment of U.S. missile defense facilities near its borders and called for legally binding guarantees from the U.S. and NATO that the missile shield is not targeting Russia. Now, I don't know how old you guys are. I'm old enough to remember the Cold War, and I grew up in Germany at that time. and it was a very serious thing. A lot of talk like that was going back and forth, and to have it re-emerge some 20 years later is a little disconcerting for someone who has actually lived through some of that in the 80s, the 70s, and 80s. So that's why I thought we included here. It's just a very strange statement to make. All of the, and quite a strong one, in fact.
Absolutely.
Yes, yeah.
Well, we know that China and Russia are doing naval maneuvers at the moment in the East China Sea, and the rest of the Asian nations in the South China Sea. So there's an unparalleled amount of military buildup in this region that we live in.
Yeah, that's right, and on both sides. So just to be clear, so there's this China that is conducting this exercise with Russia, and then the rest of the Asian nations is doing that with the United States.
Now they're less than 1,000 miles away from each other.
Yeah, that's right. There's definitely no scope at all for anything to go wrong. That's
away with missile, and it's on, guys. That's what we see.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. We have one more news item, Dave. Do you want to take this one?
Sure.
It links into our shows of ancient tech. So
fantastic. Okay, so this one's documentary about mechanism of Antikythera. Now, if you remember one of our previous shows, this was the clock mechanism, right? So the secrets of one of the most remarkable technologies finds from ancient Greece had been probed for the first time using powerful X-ray imaging equipment, specially shipped to Athens, which is really weird that they're having such financial problems right now. Yeah. Okay, so the Antikythera mechanism, as it is known, is regarded as the world's oldest computer. This is one that could plot the positions of the stars backwards and forwards in time and everything like that. I had one of the, and we spoke about this in length. Please go back to one of our previous shows for this. And so it's a BBC4 did a show called the 2,000-year-old clock, and it's going to be broadcast on Thursday, the 10th of May this year. So I mean, we're not talking about this is the results of this. There, it's how can you dismiss this when we're talking BBC, that's Britain's government channel, yeah? It's the boring channel. It's like our ABC here. It's like American Broadcasting Network. It's the government-run channel. They're pushing this. It's like watching something in a History Channel. You know what I mean? It's got some authentication, it's got a build-up behind it. It's got some pull. It really has some power behind it and the truth behind what they're talking about. They don't run, mystery shows about things that don't have any validity.
No, they run a lot of debunking shows, but don't let that distract you from actually watching this documentary. It's meant to be it's meant to be quite good, and it's gone mainstream. Dave is right. The BBC, it's like American CBS or ABC or whatever. Mm-hmm. In Australia, like any channel that we have, ABC. It is a sign of the times that these pieces of information, while readily available, haven't really been spoken about, but are now coming to the forefront of our common knowledge as a society. So it is now becoming acceptable to talk about these things after. This thing has been around or has
2,000 years.
Well, it has, but we found it recently about 100 years ago, and we started investigating it 50 years ago. So the thing itself has been around, but our acceptance of it is only very slowly growing. I think we have this cultural block, or maybe a filter, a filter that was taught us, which makes it very hard for new knowledge and controversial knowledge to get through before it becomes mainstream. And it looks like the Antikythera mechanism is now well on its way to the mainstream, which is great.
Hooray!
That's right.
Okay, so where we see the same thing. It's where it takes about between 30 and 50 years for any technology to be recognized, even though it could be completely valid, like this machine is. But it takes about that long for the people who write the textbooks to make the entries, to consider it in the timeline, and then, it's probably one of those things that makes us throw away our history books. So this is one of the largest technological discoveries from a long time ago, which makes us rewrite everything. So are we good?
Yeah, look, I think that covers the news for this week. And what we should do is introduce our very special guest, Dave.
No problems. Look, without further ado, we welcome Kerry Cassidy. Good evening, Kerry.
Hi there.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent.
We're doing great. Could you just tell everyone who's listening to our listeners at the moment, who are you and where are you from? No, quite simply, look, we everyone knows we've been plugging this for quite some time. Kerry is part of Project Camelot and has a large background in the information gathering of whistleblowers, and she has a show called Whistleblowers Radio, and you've got a show on this network as well. Yeah, Kerry?
Well, yeah. I was just wondering if you wanted me to say I was from Procyon or wherever. Just kidding.
I thought it was
no.
so direct.
No, see, what we like to do on our show is learn more about the person and
Okay.
how it takes. What was it in your life that took you to where you are now? Like, because we all know in our past shows we've talked about the forks in people's lives. At one point, there's this decision-making process that's required or something happens to you. Like Jose Escamilla saw a UFO but was never interested up until that date. And then he started to become a ufologist as well as a filmmaker. So what happened in your life?
Okay, well, first of all, let me say that, yes, I'm a co-founder of Project Camelot, and we specialize in whistleblower testimony, but we also deal with actually conspiracies on all different levels, and we're all about putting together the big picture. We've been in operation for over 6 years, and more or less funded out of our own pockets with donations from our supporters and listeners over the years. And every once in a while I put on a conference, either online or offline, in the real world, so to speak, and try to make some money to keep supporting this effort. Initially, Bill Ryan and myself traveled the globe doing interviews, video interviews, and I think made sort of famous, or maybe notorious, a sort of a guerrilla filmmaking style in which I basically decided to go around interviewing people and putting a camera sort of in front of their face and then having a conversation with them for 2 hours plus. And basically when I edit the interview, all I do is cut between cameras, but I don't take out any of their testimony. The only time I ever cut really what they have to say is if inadvertently there's a name of someone that they didn't want out there and they've asked it to be removed, or it is in order to protect them so that they don't get some kind of what do you call that,
Retribution.
Litigation,
yeah.
maybe, even being sued?
No, I didn't mean that. I meant, when somebody like badmouths somebody and you can be sued for libel.
Yes.
Libel,
Libel,
yeah,
that's
cool.
correct.
So that would be the only sort of exceptions, other than if they suddenly became very boring. But that actually hasn't been much of a problem with years. It's been quite extraordinary, the kind of testimony we've gotten, and all I have to do is listen to some of our over 300 hours of whistleblower testimony, and you'll find that out. Some of it is written because some of our top whistleblowers never went in front of the camera, so it's important to keep that in mind. And let me see. You wanted to know how I got into all of this. Well, let me see. I guess first of all, I came in to this incarnation knowing a lot. Being an intuitive and already sort of researching esoteric subjects that, like when I was, 11 years old or something. And my mother had some interesting books and I started to read them. And they seemed very familiar. For example, she had a book on alchemy, and that seemed extremely interesting and familiar to me. So I used to read that when I was quite young. And I was a voracious reader, and I also had no trouble sort of understanding that we were, that this reality wasn't all there was to life. And so, that sort of, and then I had, I guess your typical, but I had abduction sort of scenarios going on at a young age.
Yeah,
And that
same
was-
here.
I'm sorry?
Same here.
Okay.
Hmm.
And so that always sort of, I guess, wakes you up in a certain sense. And so that's pretty much put me on this road. I didn't have any idea I was going to get involved in Camelot until it just sort of materialized when Bill Ryan and I connected, and I interviewed him, having picked up a consumer grade camcorder out of frustration to go out and make my own UFO documentary when I had reached a sort of glass ceiling in Hollywood after working there for about 20 years in various aspects of the production and development. And I was not able to get anywhere with several of my projects that I was trying to pitch, including the Wingmakers story, which is based on wingmakers.com. Mm-hmm. If you're not familiar with that website, you should go there. And there's a book there that I believe they still make freely available, which is based on a whistleblower testimony, as a matter of fact, and about a scientist that goes on the run from a black project, and how he, gets in touch with the Wingmakers, these beings that maybe, in a certain sense, are predecessors. At least a few, one group of beings that are, and so that's kind of how I got into all of this.
Awesome.
That's amazing. No, look, it is, because I mean, and this is the same for most people that we've spoken to. In fact, for Dave and myself, I don't think anybody actually started out on this on purpose. It's not something when you grew up and you thought, oh, I'm going to be an investigator of unknown things and incredible phenomena and UFOs and such. You want to be an astronaut, maybe, or
Firefighter.
Firefighter. Yeah, but and this is what Dave and I are trying to bring out and let our listeners partake in, is the fact that this normal stuff that happens to normal people. Well, it's not normal stuff, but it's happening so much. It should be normal, right? People should accept it for what it is. It happens all the time. These things are there. And by things, I don't mean necessarily people or creatures. I just mean phenomena which we can't explain. And thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Yeah, no problem. Actually, with me, what I find is you haven't been regressed per se, although I did do this thing where it's on my website, but just for the purposes of this interview, I decided that I was going to reach enlightenment in this life. So without any encouragement or instruction from anyone around me, and had I told anyone around me that, they probably would have thought I was out of my mind. But I don't know why, I just knew that was what one needed to do. So I set about doing that, and I got a couple of books on Kundalini, and then I basically meditated nonstop for about a month in a loft in New York that was sort of loaned to me as a place to stay during my my sort of days in New York City, where I was studying acting at night and working during the day at temp jobs and as a receptionist. This is when I was in my 20s. And so I linked my chakras, and I had some amazing samadhi experiences, and to this day I have repeated samadhi experiences, and basically did reach some level of what you might call enlightenment. But this is something that one has to continually revisit, especially on the planet, this planet being in the state that it's in. So it's an ongoing process. It's not something that you just have overnight and it happens and it's done. So at any rate, that's something that I was involved in, and that also, because I studied Eastern philosophy and so on, that has also sort of informed my way of looking at this very strange sector that I'm in, that has to do with, a lot of scientists and what you might say is left brain thinking, but originally I come from a more right brain perspective, if you will, and
Our
so that's
approach
one
as
thing.
well is.
And the other thing that I wanted to tell you guys is that I also, when I was in New York City, I had some amazing sort of out of body experiences, whatever you want to call them, and all kinds of things going on. But I also connected with Montauk.
Oh, really?
And yes, and the other night on my Revolution Radio show, I had Preston Nichols on my show, and he was talking about the Montauk, what's called the Montauk Horse, which is a sort of a time travel signal. Well, it's a statue that supposedly, well, was in a square. I have seen it in this future scenario in Paris. Now, I don't know where they think it is at that scenario when he described it, but it was described by time travelers who went to the year, I think the year was something like 6,000 something, and then came back during the Montauk experiment. But strangely enough, I see that place and that horse. And anyway, I was going to school in the underground. I know this sounds really bizarre, but when I was in New York, I would wake up and I would have gone into the underground, and I don't understand what I was doing there. But later, when I got into the Montauk Project, there were so many parallels to the place that I had been going in sort of an out-of-body way at night that there seems to be a very strong connection. So, and I did have a connection with Peter Moon, who wrote those books or was a publisher of those books and wrote them with Preston Nichols, and also with Joseph Matheny, who years later, as it happened, before Camelot, I got in touch with, and he and I wrote a treatment for a movie based on the Montauk Project.
Oh, when is that coming out?
Well, we wrote it all these years ago, and then we pitched it, or it got pitched a couple of places, but didn't go anywhere. So then more recently, I had Joseph Matheny on one of my radio shows, and he actually, who's absolutely brilliant, he's an author of a time travel cult novel called Ong's Hat. And I highly recommend it. It's available for free on the internet as well. Just put in ONGS Hat. And anyway, he's also a software engineer, I guess, brilliant programmer, and also programs AI. So that tells you a little bit about his brain. He's also sort of a multimedia artist, I guess you might call him.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
No, well, so I was saying that particular, I did pitch it. Actually, we pitched it to the story person at the time for James Cameron, because in my view, James Cameron is the perfect director to direct a movie on the Montauk Project.
Agreed.
But at the time, we were told, no, he only does his own projects now or something. So I don't know if there's still the case. This is like, I don't know, like 7 years ago or something, maybe 8.
Wow, because he's only just now announced another series of the Avatar films, yeah?
Really?
Yeah. So last week we were talking about dimensional travel and other dimensions and the Montauk Project as well came up. But you mentioned, just a few minutes ago, you mentioned about the out-of-body experiences. Now, in your opinion, I know everyone has the ability to do it, but you've done remote viewing, yeah? And
yes.
how does that connect? How does that take the layman from their imagination of the out-of-body experience? How does that take them? And can you tell us anything about your experiences with the remote viewing?
Sure. Yeah, that's actually quite interesting. Remote viewing is fascinating. In fact, a couple weeks ago, I had Courtney Brown on my show, and I believe it was on Revolution Radio as well.
Mm-hmm, I heard that interview.
They were kind enough to let me go overtime because I have these amazing guests, And what happens is I end up going over 2 hours, and so Nighthawk is like graciously granting me extra time, me and my guest. So that's actually pretty cool, and pretty unheard of. But at any rate, so yes, regarding remote viewing, I've always had a fascination with that and anything to do with psychic ability to see the future, et cetera, et cetera. Simply because I had abilities in that area, and I just find it endlessly fascinating. So I want to say right now that for those listeners who are not familiar with Ingo Swann's website, let's see, biomindsuperpowers.com. biomindsuperpowers.com. That it's absolutely one of the best websites on the net, in my opinion, and absolutely brilliant, his writings. And he does give a history of remote viewing there, which is, I think, a must-read for anyone who is at all interested in the subject. And so with that said, yes, I did decide to learn remote viewing, and I took the class from a certain individual who shall remain nameless, and then I basically sort of set off on my own to work on it. And what I used to do, as it happened, there was a time when I was working in the .com world, and then if you are familiar with what went on back then, and this is just prior, I think, to 2000, 9/11, and so I had, I was what was called an interactive producer in the .com world, and so on and so forth. At any rate, I lost my job. Well, people were being laid off in droves. Actually, I think I quit my job. I'm always doing things completely against the grain here.
Sounds like the wrong time to do it too in the .com bubble.
Yes. So it crashed, and consequently I was out of work. And as luck would have it, I moved into these little Hollywood bungalows literally in Hollywood, and, to save money. And when I was looking for a job, I had my days free. So then I started remote viewing the front page of the newspaper, and I would remote view it, and then I would go down and buy it. I was right. So that's how I practiced. And actually I started to get quite good at it, and some very unexpected, hits, as they might say. Mm-hmm. And I also had some kind of bizarre experiences. Like one time I was going to an interview, and I didn't have my address or anything. I only knew the street it was on, and I didn't have the number or anything. And I just remote viewed it, and I ended up at the place, and I have no idea to this day how I got there. I drove there, but I don't know how I found it.
That's awesome.
This huge boulevard.
And David Hudson, this is the monatomic gold. Am I coming through?
Yes.
Am I coming through clearly?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great.
Okay, so what did you want to know about monatomic gold?
Oh, and look, I was curious because I couldn't find it. If you ever had got the chance to speak to Sir Lawrence Gardner.
No, I never did. I know somebody who knows him, who knew him well. I saw that he was targeted by black magic, and actually sort of taken out before his time, so to speak. That was something that I sort of, you might say in a loose sense of the word, came to me, or I remote viewed or whatever. Monatomic gold, Dave Hudson, he is absolutely the real thing, and he has gone well down that road. I firmly believe that the Anunnaki are here, that they are still taking gold. I've been told by a whistleblower they are still taking gold off the planet as we speak.
That was one of our questions, Kerry, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was.
They're using it for, they use it for what you might call, eternal life. But you have to keep in mind that this is not eternal life. This is simply longevity. This is what they use to keep themselves living very long and staying, sort of young. but the fact of the matter is that on a soul level, this is not the same thing as eternal life. So this is, I guess you might say, the dark side of it. It's manipulating the physical to exist longer. But what you can actually do, if through linking the chakras and meditation, you can achieve the exact same thing that monatomic gold gives you, if you are able to do that, and outfit your light body. So you basically get the benefits of all those kinds of things through Kundalini.
Okay.
Because we did a past show on longevity, and another one, a separate one on monatomic elements, and especially gold.
Yeah, and why it was in fact so important. And all ancient cultures have gold designated as the element of the gods. And we dived into longevity, like you quite rightly pointed out, that it's really just life prolonging. It's not true immortality. But yeah, awesome. That's brilliant information. On that though, since they're still mining it, do you think that would explain why our gold reserves are disappearing? And in fact, would that explain why initially we had a gold-backed currency or currencies in the world that have now become fiat currency, because the gold had to be stored in one place, and then the gold was decided to be taken away potentially by those guys, and now there no longer is in fact any gold in Fort Knox?
Well, there may not be gold in Fort Knox, but there's gold a lot of other places. My understanding is, and this is from fairly recent information from various sources, that there's a lot more gold on the planet than people realize, and there's tons of gold out there. Earth is just, I guess you might say, jam-packed with gold. And the fact of the matter is that it's, as I said, it's still being mined on a regular basis and found in, and Australia, by the way, has a ton of gold. And yes, they are taking it off world. In fact, they're taking it off world using one of the airports, for example, in South Africa. There's a secret airport that they fly in and out of, taking gold off the planet, from what I'm told.
Wow. Everyone in the chat room has just said, everyone, I swear, has said Building 7 from WTC.
Yeah.
And the missing billions, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of controversy as to whether the gold is still in, even the gold in the Philippines is still there. I have one group telling me it's definitely there, it's guarded, it's got a force field around it. I've got another whistleblower telling me they moved it a long time ago. I'm sure they've taken a lot of it off planet. I'm sure a lot of it has gone to Mars, as usual. Mm-hmm. That's business as usual. It may have also gone to other places. They used it also in spacecraft, so they use it in the UFOs they build. As well as other things. So gold is used in many ways.
Wow.
Well, it's great to get verification and in fact have you state these things, because we took our shows down the same track and we come up with the same information. It's just good to have this reinforcement of I guess a common thread, because again
yes.
And you would have come across the same thing, right? I mean, you've done this for years longer than Dave and I, certainly in the public eye, and you must have seen the common threads that are running through all of this.
Sure. Well, yeah, I mean, triangulating information is a very, it's an age-old way of verifying things, and absolutely getting the same information from completely different sources is a great way to go. I do want to say that on an occult level, there is a great occult significance to gold. In other words, to transmuting, the sort of material into gold is a symbol, is like symbolic in terms of the occult for basically turning yourself into an enlightened spiritual being, which is how, like if you look at King Tut, the mask is is all in gold, and the cobra is coming out of the head, and all of that symbolizes the Kundalini, arisen Kundalini energy, the gold being the rise of the Kundalini energy, and the silver symbolizing it lowering, and it's like a double braided rope that goes up your spine. And so all of this is there's a lot of occult symbolism in all of it. And it's in all of the ancient art everywhere, if you look.
Oh, absolutely. And so is that, that we're almost pre-programmed to do two things. One is adorn ourselves with gold or treasure it, right? Collect it and treasure it is pre-programmed. Every culture around the world does it. And also to have a deity to serve. These are the pre-programmed things that we've run into as well. Is that the same thing with you?
Sure. I mean, I have to say that I'm pre-programmed to rebel against any such notion.
Pre-programming. Yeah, that's exactly right.
Of a deity to serve. I mean, I actually came in with the mission of getting rid of that notion altogether. So anytime somebody gives me an order, my first reaction is to do the opposite. But given that as it may be, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Sorry, my bad once again. I keep hitting exactly the wrong button there.
We had a bit of dead air, guys. Sorry about that.
I'm on my laptop. I'm using the little thing on the little touchpad. Kerry, is anyone? And I'm sorry to the caller who I just hung up on again. Kerry, is anyone mentioned? Because we look so professional. We've never had failures like this, and I'm up in Byron Bay. So, look, what has anyone ever mentioned? What will happen in 2012? To all of those people who, not doomsdayers, but certainly, can see past it, or a psychic, or anything like that.
Well, yeah, it's quite fascinating to look at that time period. Of course, Patrick Jarrell, you may know of the Camelot interview. We actually interviewed Patrick Jarrell, who believed the whole world was going to more or less, end on December 21st, 2012. I think we're fast approaching the date when he's going to be proved, inexorably wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But, and therefore that was the only video of all the videos we've ever done that we put a disclaimer on. But I have to say that, there are multiple timelines. And again, we were talking about this with Preston Nichols. It is quite fascinating to see. I mean, many people will know my interview with Bill Wood.
Turn your radio down, guy.
I'm getting some kind of feedback.
It's okay.
If you come on the air, guys, you must turn your radio off. We can.
And
Michael, I'll hang up on you.
It's turned off.
Good.
Okay, good.
anyway, you'll know of my interview in which he talked about a converging of the timelines that had been talked about also by David Wilcock and many other people prior, in the years before. Dan Burish talked about something of that nature. The idea that there are two major timelines and that one will begin to take precedence. Some people call it a merging of the timelines. Whether indeed that will happen in just that way, I'm not sure. There does seem, Terence McKenna did allude to a sort of novelty situation in which novelty comes down to, I believe it reduces to zero.
No, I can't take him. It's just echoing to everything. So look, Kerry, yeah. So you talk about emerging the timelines. Now we in our previous show we talked about dimensional travel and how they could fork off and come back together. So that's amazing that we're getting this validation again.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one thing that I would encourage people to do is try not to have necessarily preconceived notions about what's going to happen in, the end of 2012, for example. And I have to say that I've had lots of visions of the future, and my understanding is that, Earth goes on and we go on. In fact, that, it probably will be a bit of an underwhelming situation with regard to that time, but we are moving into a raising in consciousness on the planet, and every day the planet is being bombarded by amazing energy, and if you can't feel it, I think that you have to be brain dead at this point. So, to focus on one date, I think is kind of over the top.
Oh, absolutely. So is there anyone that comes to mind that's like your strangest or weirdest experience? I'm going to join them together into one question. Maybe you'll have two answers.
Well, I'm not sure what you're asking.
As
exactly,
a guest, maybe someone who
As a
really
guest.
was, a bit
Okay,
too much.
well, I've actually recently been interviewed on a radio show, and I hate to repeat myself, but I'm going to have to do it here because I recently had a whistleblower that talked to me about who worked in the Space Command, whatever you want to call that, and in a certain base in let me see if I can say this or not. Maybe I better not, but
That's okay.
It's the southwestern part of the United States, I guess you call it. And he basically said that things are being orchestrated from the fourth dimension, that when people leave the base and go to a jump room into Mars, the actual base exists on the fourth dimension, and this is why you don't see it when you look at the surface of Mars, because we're not looking at this fourth dimension. And that,
Kate,
that
sorry, Kate, can I ask, is that the fourth spatial dimension we're talking about, correct?
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
So, and that this specifically, the fourth dimension, is where a lot of the ETs, the lower level ETs reside, so to speak. This is what my understanding. And so, just so you know, that Phobos is the command and control center, and that it's manned by Anunnaki beings who work with, Earth, humans, and that the Anunnaki are more or less in charge. That they are also in charge of this solar system, and that they monitor all travel incoming and outgoing, and that Europa is still off limits.
Wow.
Just as Arthur C. Clarke said it was, that all worlds are yours except for Europa. We were told by Henry Deacon that was true, and I've also been told by a recent whistleblower that that's true.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
So the Anunnaki are flight controllers or defense of our solar system. So that does that put Nibiru into a question, or is there any connection to that?
No, I mean, I'm not sure what the status is on Nibiru. I think it's very possibly, just as they said it was, a planet that, as Andy Lloyd talked about, is rotating around a dark star, and it is one of more than one planet that goes around a dark star that, in essence, comes into our solar system in a sort of almost a perpendicular, slightly perpendicular orbit. And yeah, I mean, I believe it's out there. I believe it could be also affecting and going to be affecting our Earth more seriously as time goes on. I believe Ashiana Dean says that Nibiru has been destroyed, but I'm not sure about that. I don't think I necessarily agree with that, but the information I have is that there is a dark star, and that we have it is in essence, we are in a binary solar,
Binary star system.
binary
Two stars.
sun,
Yep.
two stars in the solar system. It's a binary system.
Yeah, excellent.
And then just for our listeners, that's not an unusual thing. There are quite a few systems like that, even within our Milky Way galaxy. And just one more thing, Phobos is one of the moons of Mars, just in case you guys didn't know.
And it has an enormous glyph on it. Well,
Yes, it's very oddly shaped, just
And
like
monolith.
Deimos.
absolutely, and they're on the moon as well for all those interested. Hey,
Yes.
we have Michael, who's another host. He's come in, and he'd like to ask Kerry a question.
Awesome.
Hi, Kerry. It's Mike. Hey, could you, is there more information about the situation with Drake other than what you put on your blog?
Well, I did have a conversation with him. I offered him an interview, but I think that he is sort of has some kind of agreement with this the woman who interviews him. So I don't think that he's going to be doing an interview with me, or at least so far that's the case. Although, I did offer that. He obviously was misled by a certain group of individuals who will remain nameless. on a lot of information that they were trying to basically, I guess you might say, lead him astray, and so they did. But he was honorable enough that when I called him and simply told him what the facts were, that he'd gotten his facts completely cockeyed, that he actually apologized immediately and wanted to go on Facebook and so on and make statements to that effect. So sadly, there have been several whistleblowers of late that have kind of turned on Camelot. That's not so unusual. Whistleblowers are motivated by all kinds of things, and one of those things being that, there are controllers that love to take their reins, take back the control over them and turn them against us. That's sort of business as usual for the dark side.
Hey, Kerry, I was going to ask you, with the whistleblower thing, Dr. Stephen Greer has, from the whistleblower's point of view, seems to have turned his back on them and created, become a director of the technology behind it all. So I heard an interview with you and you really pressed him.
Well, yeah. I mean, a lot of people don't realize is that was sort of a unique situation because he walked in on us. We had just been doing a what we call a future talk with Bob Dean and Henry Deacon and who else? Alfred Weber was there. Mm-hmm. And we were backstage of the Barcelona conference at the time. And I had put a couple of statements on my blog the night before because I'd seen him speak in the auditorium and address what was almost 1,500 people. And basically he said two things that I felt were sort of outright lies. And so I addressed that in my blog. And so he basically we had been asking him for an interview and he'd been putting us off up to then. But then he sort of barged in and sat himself down and said, okay, ready to be interviewed. And so we were like, oh, okay. And I didn't really want to interview him. Bill was more kind of gung-ho to do that. But at any rate, we did interview him, as you can see. And we have very strong differences of opinion. That's obvious. And I wasn't going to I told him in advance before the cameras were turned on that it would be a very, that it wouldn't be a usual interview and that it would be contentious. And was he prepared for that? And he said, bring it on.
Oh.
So indeed we did.
Oh, good answer. Look, we've got a caller, 3103. Could you state who you are and what question do you have for Kerry? 103?
Hi, yes. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
I just saw on Red Ice Creations, Cliff High did his interview on Drake, and Benjamin Fulford and David Wilcock, his view on the whole situation. And did you know about that?
I don't know if it's a recent Cliff High. I've heard Cliff's point of view on Fulford, and from time to time he's made statements about Fulford and Wilcock and even from once in a while Camelot. Most of the time was Bill Ryan and back in those days. Cliff and I have talked on and off, and we do talk. So he's a good guy. He's quite intelligent. I don't always agree with him, but it's not necessary. I don't feel it's necessary for people to agree all the time. But I don't know what he's saying right now, so you'd have to kind of maybe quote him if it's something very recent. As far as Drake goes, I made some very clear statements on my blog that are now in the articles portion of the website. So if you go to the news site and you click on blog, you'll see there's a drop down that says articles. That has a lot of articles that I've written. They originally showed up on my blog, and then I created this sort of special area for sort of formal articles that have a beginning, middle, and an end, as opposed to some blog posts that are just very short things and all of that stuff. So people could find them. In there, you'll find me talking about David Wilcock's interview with Drake and my skepticism on some of the ways that Drake comes across. Some of the things he says, like, don't worry, everyone, just go into your homes, sit down, turn on your TV, we'll take care of everything, and so on. In other words, that's not a revolution by the people. Hello.
not by a long shot.
No, that's right.
So that made me suspicious, because that's a rather paternalistic way of coming across. And I'm happy to say that to his face. I encouraged him to read my blog post, which I believe he did. I even encouraged him to write a comment if he wished in return. And we've given him entree into the Camelot Forum, where he's welcome to post anytime he would like. In talking to him, I believe that he is a serious individual. I believe he does want a change in this country. I'm not sure about his methods. I don't know what he really is doing or any of that. I don't have that much exposure to him or his information. I don't follow everything that he's been out doing, other than the times when I know he was more or less put up to badmouth me and Camelot without very much knowledge in any way, shape, or form. And that in itself tells you something about someone. Certain other individuals are doing the same thing. When people go out with very little information and no evidence, and they start pontificating about other people, then I think you have to be questioning what they're saying. So what I would say about Drake is simply that I don't know all that much about what he puts out there, other than the interview I heard with David Wilcock, in which I questioned certain elements.
Excellent.
Thanks, that's insightful. Thank you, seriously. We are fast running out of time. There's two questions I would like to ask you, without further ado. In your mind, who really is in charge here? And then if you could also maybe talk about your next guest that you have on your show, that would be great.
Okay, well, first of all, let me say next weekend I'm going to be at the Mount Shasta Eclipse event that Sean David Morton is putting on, and I'll be speaking there. And so that should be a lot of fun. And Mount Shasta apparently has, a certain group of ETs that inhabit the mountain there. Mm-hmm. So no doubt we can have a lot of fun and games. I'm not necessarily convinced that they're positive ETs. I don't know that for sure. So let me just say that I haven't had a lot of downloads about that particular group that I know of. So I will see what goes on there, I'm sure, when I'm there. And that should be quite fascinating. In answer to your question, who's in charge? I say this, and I think the evidence is quite plentiful, that there are groups of ETs that are working with the military industrial complex, the DART, the Black Projects, and the Secret Space Program. Mm-hmm. We have, in essence, and this is on a worldwide basis, what is in essence a rogue civilization. It is, they are working with various ET groups, and some of them are working in sort of, they're almost at war with each other. And that means that there are groups of the Army is working with one group, the Air Force with another, the Navy with another, wow. The Russians with another, the Chinese with another. There are many ET groups out there attempting to regain control of the Earth because they used to have it, take control of humanity in one way or another, eat us, kill us, take over the Earth, help us, educate us, you name it. I mean, the gamuts, the agendas are plentiful, and some of them are at war with each other. Some of them are in our DNA, and we have therefore been warring with each other because we recognize our age-old enemy from other star systems in other beings. So it is a huge kind of mess going on that we're all a part of. And I do want to say that I agree with Ashiana Dean, something she said that I would think was very, very perceptive and yet quite simple, which is the fact of the matter is this is an experiment where we are the feet on the ground and that this is a planet in which we were brought together, all these different races. There's at least 12 base races of which we are a part in our genetics. And the idea was for us to get along. If we could get along here, we could get along anywhere, and there was hope for the rest of the civilizations out there. I don't recommend bowing down to ET or off-planet beings or races. You have them in your DNA. You have all the possibilities and potentials that they have. And so I would really encourage Earthlings to stop bowing down to off-world visitors and stop taking orders from them as well.
Thank you. That's extremely insightful and pretty much ties in what Dave and I think is going on. It is a zoo out there, if you will. There's a lot going on, and I think that's why we don't get any pictures from outer space that are any good.
Absolutely.
No, it's true. Sorry, but sorry. We have come almost to the end. Carrie, thank you so much.
Thank you, indeed.
This was brilliant. It was fantastic. Thank you.
And if I'm doing any bowing, do you know what? It's to you, Kerry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wayne's World style, all right?
No.
We are not worthy.
The greatest compliment is to find your own gift and to go out and share it with the world. And that's what I wish for every human being.
Awesome words.
Thank you.
Hey, everyone. It's a round of applause to Kerry, although we can't hear it. I can just imagine it's there.
It's out there.
It is there. Kerry, if you want to visit us anytime, you're welcome to. If you feel it's necessary to come back, certainly you're welcome back anytime you like. Everybody, next week, I'd just like to say that what we've got planned for our show next week is a recap show of the last 10 shows, or the last 9 shows, and it's going to be a caller heaven, all right? Please call in if you have a question, because I know that our shows have usually been very jam-packed and no one can get in. It's one of the big complaints about our show, that no one can get in. Please, we're going to take all the calls we can, answer the chat.
Yeah, just on the format. So in the first hour, there will be the recap. We're going to discuss what we discussed with you. We're going to go over some of the material. And then the last hour will be entirely up to the callers. So there should be plenty of time.
Absolutely. And my apologies also through the show tonight. I've tried to take a couple of calls, and at one time we had about 5 calls going at the same time, which we can't take. And so please be patient with us. I had to hang up on a lot of you, so I'm really sorry about that. All right, so that's come to the end of the show. Remember, join the chat, join the show. Follow us on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Go to the Shiny Side Out. If you can, in fact, just Google Shiny Side Out and we're the top link now. So enjoy it.
I forget what it's called, and Huntington Beach.
Huntington, yeah. I knew you were going to say Huntington, and actually.
It's office buildings, and it's a huge boulevard if you've ever been on Huntington Boulevard. And the odds of me finding the place for the interview were just like astronomical. So I don't know. Anyway, that was just one of the things that happened.
Wow, that's incredible. Hey, Kerry, I was watching one of your interviews with your the two cam method, and it was the fellow that Bob Lazar went to the first night that he worked, or the first day after the first days of his job, and he told his story to that fellow. I forget his name now.
John Lear.
Yeah, that's it, John Lear.
Yes.
I was watching that interview just the other day, and I saw the 2-camera method. When was that done? When was that one?
Well, we actually interviewed John Lear a couple of times,
Okay.
but I think both times were at his house.
Yeah, that was at his house too, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
He has
that-
a fabulous library in his house.
Mhm.
It's an old Spanish-style house, sort of a rambling place up on the hills in Las Vegas.
Nice. Because that was it. That was a really good interview. I like the way you do this. And one of the things that I noticed what you have, I'm going to give you some kudos here, right? It's a good thing. We're all friends. You're able to take a meandering interview and bring them back on point so often and so well. A lot of people will just keep trailing off or going somewhere else on tangents, and you really bring them back to the point. And that's one of your absolute skills. I have to give you some kudos on that one, right? I don't think you really
Thank you.
needed to do it, in fact, in that interview in that case. But I've heard it a number of times, and I listen to your show, and and I can hear the guy rambling, and I go, you asked him one question, he's over there, and you just bring him back, you reel him back, and it's a great skill.
Thank you very much. That's kind of you. Yes. Well, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I am, I guess, very notorious at this point for my interview style. But one of the things about it is that I do kind of go into, I am connected with other beings when I'm interviewing, and I am getting information during the time when I interview, which tells me where to go with the questions and what questions to ask. And also, this is why I'm actually, it's like driving a car and having an idea where you're going. I may not know the exact destination, but I definitely know, the state we're supposed to be in, and and the various towns we're supposed to hit, so to speak, as opposed to someone who just interviews somebody and then asks them a question and lets them go off and take them to Nowheresville or whatever. So I see the sort of parameters ahead of time, and I have said this recently as well, but and I didn't used to talk about this all that much, but I've decided to start revealing these kinds of things more often. But basically what happens is sometimes I am connected with the person I'm going to interview the night before or a couple of days before. I will have dreams of talking with them, so I actually get advanced information.
Yeah, I actually suffer from precog, and I call it suffer.
It's a curse.
Yeah, you never know when it's handy, when it's not.
So you understand what I'm talking about.
Every single one of those words you said in that order.
On that though, I've got a question as well, Kerry. This is all very much it's quite challenging for the average person in the street. It really is, okay? And I've come across a lot of people, and Dave has, they just shake their head and move away. So is there been a point in your interviews where a story or a guest took you so far down the rabbit hole that you didn't quite know where you were, or what to make of it?
As in, maybe revealed something completely unexpected.
Yeah, so that even challenged your admittedly very wide and open mind.
Or belief system, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what's interesting. I'm sorry to say that I have this sort of, I don't know why I have this, but I don't have limits on my mind in that way. I never did. And I was actually very lucky as a kid because I grew up with parents who, I never went to a church or never had any religious trappings in my life. And in fact, when I was a young woman, like 12, young girl, my mother decided, she was sort of adventurous, and she decided she was going to find us a church or something, or a religion kind of place to go. And so she decided to go investigate every religion out there. So she would take me along with her just as for company. And we went to Buddhist temples. We went to all the different kinds of various religious places that you could go and do that, because she thought, well, she should probably, introduce her kids to some kind of religion thing. And so,
that's brilliant.
So I just ended up to be very open-minded in that way. And I don't have, I'm also have a huge imagination, and of course, with all the other things, contacts with other beings and so on and so forth, it tends to, open your mind. In fact, I usually had the opposite problem. My problem was that I couldn't actually get back down to this earthly reality very often when I was younger, especially. So, in fact, when I was in my 20s, at one point I had no money whatsoever, and a friend lent me like $5 just to eat. And basically what I was doing was thinking, how when you're really young, you kind of can go off the deep end. I decided that, it was absolutely true that you should just get food and whatever you needed should just come. So I didn't have to do anything. so, so I experimented with things. I did some really wild things when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's not an answer to your question really directly, but it is in a roundabout way.
It is.
Because I had this my setup for coming in this life was not the kind of limited, belief system, this, that, and the other. In fact, my friends even used to call me an ET, and I didn't know what the hell they meant by that. I mean, I knew there were ETs, but I didn't know why they thought I was one. Now I understand more so, right? And if they knew if those people knew I was doing Camelot, I'm sure that they would probably fall over. But at any rate.
No, it's a fantastic answer, and I'll be honest with you. And most of the people that have come to this place or do similar things have had a very similar childhood, which was certainly not dogmatic or restricted. In my case, was my grandfather was a free thinker who challenged me intellectually when I was 5 years old, and he said, well, he gave me all the bad things about the Catholic Church. Nothing against the Catholic Church. He just had a beef with them, right? He became a free thinker. He was in the war, all those things. And ever since then, and my dad was a Muslim, mom was a Christian, so I didn't have to go to either religious education. So, I understand exactly what you're saying. And this is really, I think, what is required, I think, of someone to have this kind of open mind. And we do have a couple of questions, if that's okay with you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
One, I'm not entirely, I'm not familiar with the context, but I hope it's going to be okay.
So before you ask, Kerry, we've been running in the last week the top 5 questions we'd ask you, competition from the listeners. So they're not really coming from us. We just want to say that, right? Because we're all a big, warm, loving family. And I also haven't done the research on those ones. I've got my own ones, which are they're a bit warmer and fuzzier, but. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, same here. In fact, we've got someone in the chat room who's just posted a whole bunch more. Now, don't be offended if these are meant to offend. I don't want to, but
you can always say no answer if you want. I don't mind. I don't know what they are.
100%. So there's this one here which ask you about your alternative life on Procyon. Now,
I don't. All I know is there's this guy called the Former White Hat. And he has a blog that he set up, and he likes to. I call it spoofing. Mm-hmm. Everyone has their point of view, and I think Duncan O'Finian just outed him. So actually, he outed his real name, I believe.
Oh.
And I have to say that I think I can say this now because since Duncan already outed him, I had already known somebody. I don't know why, but somebody had already done some investigations and let me know something about this individual. So apparently they say they've met me, but I don't know who they are. So maybe they met me in passing at one of my conferences or whatever kind of thing. And, so I don't know who they are. But at any rate, I know that I believe they're related to Anna Nin, who is a very famous novelist, a French novelist. Very highly regarded. I think around the early 1900s, and she wrote what was called erotica, but it was not porn really. It was erotica, and she was sort of a liberated woman from that time, and she wrote great literary books that are very, very highly regarded in that regard. So. At any rate, I believe that they, maybe you might say, are borrowing from their genetic pool because they use some of her, in this. I haven't read a whole lot of his stuff, but I went over there when he started talking about me, obviously, and checked that out. And I've seen a few of his posts since then, but I don't go there very often. So what I picked up on was the novelist side of this person, and I basically saw that they were doing, very loose characterizations of people that then they would take a great deal of what's called literary license and weave it into sort of a personality profile, if you will. Mm-hmm. I thought it was quite intelligently done, well written. you could quarrel with their choices, but that would be true of any actor out there who makes an artistic choice that you don't agree with necessarily, or a painter or any other artist. So I viewed it as a form of what you call, in the art world, sort of spoofing.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of camp, if you understand that.
Yeah.
And I have a huge background in film and theater and all of that, so I can appreciate it from that point of view. As far as my forays into Procyon, I have no memory of that in this life. So
Okay.
if indeed I am from Procyon, I've always felt that I had a very strong Pleiadian connection. There's some people who would say that there is a resemblance between me and Samyasi, and indeed I had a photo taken in front of this silver star, sort of this huge silver emblem at Billy Meyer's place, and the photograph turned silver. And neither before nor since has it ever done so. And so I kind of felt like that was sort of a nod in my direction from the Pleiadians. But anyway, so I mean, whatever. It's fine. I have no problem with it. Some people don't like it. He said Tommy was like a gay, transvestite, cross-dresser or something. I mean, Tommy and I just laugh about this stuff. I don't... Other people, I know Bill Ryan didn't like what he said about him. I know David Wilcock didn't like what he said about him. I mean, whatever. People, I mean, I think this sector that we're in, people just take it so seriously. And I think having some artistic license and a sense of humor is not a bad thing.
Yeah, look, it's typical to train spotting. There's a lot of people who, you're absolutely right. People take this stuff so seriously that if you jostle them about a bit or give them any other kind of information that doesn't suit their silo, they get all upset and all out of shape. So I'm sort of with you on that. Hey, do you mind if I ask you, why Project Camelot? This is actually Mecky's question, and I've nicked it. I'm sorry, Mecky.
That's all good, man.
I had to, man. It was too good. Because, and Mecky says, do you want to ask the whole question yourself? Because it really is yours.
Yeah, sure, why not? Okay, look, the name Project Camelot is very evocative, and I was just wondering if it was a reference to the Round Table potentially, or a quest for higher truth, for the Holy Grail, if you will, without it being a substantial thing. So yeah, why did you guys call it Project Camelot?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a choice, because what happened was. And that you can go down that rabbit hole quite a long distance, and very few people actually have picked up on it. But the fact of the matter is that what happened was, Bill Ryan was one of my early interviewees when I picked up that consumer grade camcorder and decided to go out and start interviewing people for a UFO documentary that I was making. And anyway, what happened was he was representing the Serpo project. And so I interviewed him, and we hit it off, and then we kept in touch over the email and Skype. And then what happened was he actually, Skype wasn't even invented back then. It was
like Messenger.
Yahoo Messenger, I
Yeah.
think it was. And my mother had passed away, and I got a small inheritance, and I decided to go to Egypt, because I'd been there with her, and I wanted to go back. And so I decided to go on the trip with William Henry and Jordan Maxwell. That was a sort of a return to finding signs of Atlantis in Egypt, because that had always fascinated me. So I did that, and then on the way back, Bill invited me to stop by England, and he would show me all the power places such as Stonehenge and the former home of King Arthur, Tintagel, and so on. So we went directly to Tintagel, and when we arrived there, I had instant past life memories of the time of Arthur, and it was very, very intense. And Bill says that he didn't have that. But what was interesting is that I saw him then as well. and I was sort of tapping into all sorts of things. And he, as a matter of fact, had been told by completely independent of all this, and I didn't even know it at the time, but later he told me that various psychics had told him over the years that they thought he might have been King Arthur. Now, there are many people out there who claim to have been King Arthur, so don't go off the deep end of this. And Bill hates it when to bring this up. So if you bring it up to his face, he will deny it and say it's ridiculous and all this kind of thing. But I have to say that, and I hate to be, sort of a cliche here, but in a sense, I also relate to having been Guinevere. And
I was thinking of you. Guinevere was coming into my mind before you said it. It's amazing. Okay, go on.
So, but I think that maybe there are many people that kind of do what's called imprinting off certain historical figures, and that they do carry in the same mission, if you will. And that could be true, for example, of David Wilcock not necessarily having been Edgar Cayce, but doing a sort of imprint carrying the same mission. Now that doesn't mean that you couldn't also have been the person. I mean, someone had to be them, But all I'm doing here is just letting you know that I'm not completely, I'm open to other interpretations of all of this. But the weird thing is that this is how we connected, and this is how Project Camelot was created, because we connected in Tintagel. We decided then and there to put our skill sets together to create this, what was going to be a website, and based on my filmmaking skills and his ability to build websites, and both of us being writers, and that we would go out and we both wanted disclosure, and we both wanted to get the truth out about what was really going on. And we decided we would interview whistleblowers from Black projects. And we never looked back. We never questioned this. We never even said to each other, well, this could be dangerous. We just did it, and we launched it, and it was like magical. We seemed to have everything going in our favor from day one. Initially. Now, eventually things, they did sort of launch their negativity against us, but we really had the force with us, if you wish, however you want to call that, in the early first 2 years of operation. And we just kind of went through the roof in terms of the following, the amount of people that were interested in what we were doing. And we toured the world interviewing people. We would get on a plane at the drop of a hat. We even went to Russia and interviewed Boriska because, and I convinced Bill. I had to talk to him for like a week, arguing back and forth over the Skype saying, yes, we can do this. Yes, we can do this. We did it. We had no idea how we would get Russian visas or any of the rest of it. And it all fell in place like lovely.
But it does, doesn't it? It just always does. It's amazing.
Look,
it doesn't always, but if it's meant to be, if it's, if there's some higher purpose, I think it does.
So Kerry, let's use that as a brilliant segue and bring you to Project Camelot. One of the questions that I've had in my mind ever since I started following you was, okay, look, I'm going to say this right now. I'm taking, Mekki and I are both seeing this as such a great opportunity to be able to, do that thing that you've always played at a dinner party where you say, look, who would you bring to dinner and why? And what would you ask them? And this is the thing that we're doing. We now have the opportunity to do this, which is lovely. We love it, right?
That's right.
One of the things, Kerry, that since you've been involved with Project Camelot is the very first question. Like, if aliens came down, what would I ask them? Well, with you, it's UFOs and where you think they come from, given what your Project Camelot whistleblowers have spoken about.
Well, I mean, there's many different kinds of UFOs. So there are ones that are very, very material, and the ones that belong to our military. And certainly, and may I say that some of my abduction scenarios definitely had my lab overtones. So very aware of that. I was even born in a military hospital. I was the only one of 4 kids in my family to be born in a military hospital.
No
Actually,
way, really?
and I do believe that there was some kind of weird thing going on with that. But at any rate, I also think that, so some of those UFOs that you see out there are ours, and some of them, of course, belong to off-planet races of various kinds, and there are plasma vehicles as well. So, they come from all different places.
So dimensional as well?
Sure. I mean, in other words, if you go in a UFO, you almost have to go interdimensionally, because the beings, depending on where they are, will often be on other dimensions besides this one. Otherwise, they probably wouldn't have interstellar travel,
Yeah.
They wouldn't have developed it. In other words, we are kind of at the bottom of that totem pole, being in, although we're going from 3D to 4D, and when I say we, I mean our secret space program is going interstellar at this time, and the Nazis were already moving very quickly along that trajectory.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
That was definitely sorry, Mackie, that was definitely one of the inclusive stopping points for the US integration into World War II, was to get it. That's in our opinion.
Well, sure. There's ample evidence that the Bushes were, that's not their real names, and that they are Nazis, and they've been a Nazi family since, from a long time ago, even before the World War II, and so, they were financing, I guess, Hitler and all of this kind of thing. So, yeah.
Harriman Bush, who was the grandfather, worked for the Harriman, who are well-known Nazi financiers in New York. You're absolutely correct. There's no secret there, and it's not even hidden information, to be honest with you. Right? It's anyone who wants to follow the Bush family tree will be appalled, I would say, see what happened there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we also did a show on whether when the UFOs are able to, because of our very limited visual range, that they can come in and out as well, of visibility, like a cloak, if you will, yeah? So, and even on an individual basis, just appear in someone's room. So, do you want to do the next one, Mackie? Your audio was a bit bad, Dan. I think it's come good again.
Okay. There's actually a couple of questions we have just from the chat room. I'm going to use a couple of those. And also going into are we going to fine? Dave?
Wow, I'm sorry, you're breaking up.
Yeah, you're breaking up a bit there, Mackie.
Okay, can you hear me? No?
I couldn't hear the question.
That's okay.
Okay, sorry. No, okay, there's a question from the chat room, and just in time, and he was asking about cloning, and if you could briefly explain your view on cloning.
On cloning, okay.
Yes.
Well, that's interesting because it came up, I guess somebody called last night when I think it was last night when I was talking to Preston Nichols about that as well. And I think it's interesting. My understanding of cloning is that the clone does not have a soul. So that's a distinction. So they will have, they will be a sort of a duplicate that's grown however they're grown, in a petri dish or whatever. But the soul, a person's soul won't be part of the clone. And this is part of the problem where I don't think clones have the longest lives, from what I understand. I'm not sure, and I believe that they're doing a lot of cloning. There's ample evidence that even Russia, there's an interesting book that I was reading quite some time ago, which was based on truth, that Russia cloned several American leaders, and that they're keeping the actual leaders on an island. Was the story, but I have to say that elements of it rang true. That they're keeping the real ones on an island, locked in a sort of a very luxurious prison, and near Russia somewhere, and that the real one, the clones are now the ones that are orchestrating things here in the U.S. and that they're being run by, you know, I guess nefarious means by certain Russians. But I mean, yes. So I mean, there's a lot going on with respect to clones, and I mean, there's also other things such as androids, which I don't think are clones, but they're more like robotic beings that look. But these are so sophisticated that they look totally human and act totally human, and yet they're robots. So, you know, Battlestar Galactica, I guess, would be the best reference point for that. So, whereas people are sort of all hot and heavy, all over clones, I think that androids are a lot more, let's say, dangerous.
Yeah.
It's a lot of talk that Men in Black may, in fact, display robotic characteristics at times.
I'm sorry?
The Men in Black.
Men in Black display robotic characteristics. So do you think that?
Well, I you know, I mean, depends how you want to look at that. But, well, Dan Bierish had on one of our videos described a very sort of gruesome story about Men in Black. And if true, it's really quite dreadful. Now, there's also something else going on has to do with using dead soldiers' bodies.
Reactivation or reanimation.
And putting sort of another soul. Now there's a soul transference, or there's a, you know, there is, from what I understand, there is stealing of souls, and that there's a very dark art going on in this regard, and then they are sort of using them to then reanimate bodies and so on and so forth. So yeah, there's a lot of really dreadful stuff going on out there with regard to all of that.
Is there any word on, you know, Hollow Earth or Hollow Moon or something like that coming from the whistleblowers?
Well, yeah. I mean, I would say that the moon is more or less hollow. It was established by several of our whistleblowers. John Lear also talks about the moon being relatively hollow. I mean, they say it rings like a bell.
That's right.
That's it. Yep.
And there's also something to do with he has this whole argument about and I'm not sure what it, you know, because I'm not a scientist, so I can't probably make that argument. But at any rate, it has to do with how much it weighs and why it does what it does. I believe that it was certainly sort of moved into place by a certain ET race. And I also believe I've remote viewed the moon, and this is before Camelot. And I did see these beings. I had a very clear, in fact, I wrote it into a screenplay. So I have it in writing prior to Camelot. And then when I got into Camelot, whistleblower testimony actually backed my information up.
Excellent.
These last structures, in fact, that
we're coming to the top of the hour, sorry. Don't go away, everybody. We'll be right back after these messages.
Thank you for listening to Revolution Radio. We'll be right back after this short break, so stay tuned.
Question, if that's okay, Carrie?
Yeah, I just wanted to say a couple things.
Sure, certainly. Go ahead.
All, I was just about to talk about the glass structures that are remote viewed on the moon. Was actually there's these beings with hoods, and they're standing in a circle with some other beings that are not wearing hoods, but are probably like grays and so on. And I saw them, and they were using sound and some kind of energetics to actually create these glass-like structures. And the structures that Richard Hoagland actually discussed this recently with Jay Weidner, and those structures that he thinks were photographed were a backdrop was not the actual structures, but he was right about the fact that there are glass-like structures. It's just that he didn't actually see the right photographic evidence of that, from what I understand.
Okay, so he's on the money, but he just wasn't in the right direction.
Yeah, and I had remote viewed that before Camelot, before I ever heard Richard Hoagland talk about that. So that was just an interesting synchronicity. But I also want to say that during this break that the former White Hat has written to me and said that no, Duncan hasn't outed him, that he's got false leads out on the net, and so he's not the person that Duncan thinks he is.
Yeah.
So for what it's worth, I'm just letting you know that.
Oh, that's valuable right there. And caller, we just had a caller call in. Just hang on a second. We will get to you in 1 sec, but please just make sure if anyone is calling in that you turn your radio off, okay? Because you're going to hear it when you come in, so just turn it off. All right. Let's not let the caller hang on any longer. Caller, who are you, and what question do you have for Kerry?
Hi, my name's Jason, and I just had a question about the Hollow Earth. Brooks Agnew was doing an expedition to the North Pole to test the hypothesis that planets form as hollow spheres, and he's supposedly doing that right now. And I don't know if anybody's following that or knows what's going on with that. And also, if they hit the moon and it rang like a bell, how could they hear it ring like a bell if there's no sound in space? And
I can
also,
feel the second part of that question as a physics question, because we point a laser off it, we bounce a laser off the moon, and we can see it ring and vibrate and vibrate and vibrate as the waves of that concussion bounce around the skin of the moon. So we were able to see that, and it rang for 30 minutes the first time, then the second time it rang for 3 hours when they landed the entire probe up, the entire launch vehicle up there. So yeah, it's been proved there. But no, I'm not following Brooks.
so do they have a recording of the sound? Sorry.
No, there's no recording of the sound. We could tell it because of the reflection back of the vibrating laser.
Well,
Okay, so, yeah.
But Kerry can feel this now.
let me say that that's probably very correct scientifically what you just answered, but I also want to say that first of all, the secret space program will also have had the ability to listen and sort of view the vibration at a closer distance than what you're talking about. But the other question that you asked about Brooks Agnew, I've had Brooks on some of my Camelot roundtables last year, and he's a fascinating guy. In fact, I'm hoping to have him on my radio show again this year. But at any rate, I want to say that I do know about his expedition. I didn't know that he was actually going there right now. I know that he's always had plans to do that. And I will say that one of our whistleblowers, well, a couple of our whistleblowers did talk about the Earth. In other words, there's first of all, there's an interdimensional inner Earth in which there's quite a bit going on. But there's also, of course, the bases that go into inner Earth and the cities that are in there. I mean, there's a lot of hollow places. So I don't think it's quite accurate to say it's completely hollow. My understanding is it has, huge areas that are like have caverns and all this kind of thing. In this case of our Earth, but just so there's lots of evidence out there about the inner Earth, so to speak.
Excellent. That's a great answer.
And, yes. I have one more question. In your interview with George Kavasilis, you met George Kavasilis on the street in London, I think it was. You guys just happened to meet up, and then you did an interview.
Glastonbury.
And in Glastonbury. And he was saying that he was going to ascend, and I'm not trying to be, I believe in ascension, but he said he was going to ascend on March 23rd or the 24th of this year. Have you been in contact with him? Do you know what's going on with George?
Yeah, I'm going to probably have him as my guest on one of my shows. No offense, but I love George. He's a wonderful guy, and I do encourage you to watch my interview with him. He really tells it like he sees it, and that's just awesome. I think that he, like several people out there, many people out there, some people get sort of like this idea that they're going to ascend, and as a matter of fact, they're not done doing their journey here. And so having or knowing that information, that can be very misleading. And I think that there's a lot of sort of, I don't know, there's a lot of BS around that notion. And there's also a lot of confusion on a soul level with a lot of the people that are obsessed with the ascension. And, what I have to say is, and this is just my point of view, okay? So don't, people go off the deep end there, but let me say that it is my point of view that people that are really sort of dying for ascension, so to speak, and they really want to put themselves there and they think that they're ready to ascend, all that kind of stuff. Actually, I think what happens is it's actually more of the reverse. The people that are going to ascend and in this life are people that have grown to love the earth and have grown to love the people and really kind of learn to love, period. And leaving this as in spite of the way it is not something you do because you're sick of it. Actually, if you're sick of it, it's probably because you're not actualizing your journey here. And, I know that a lot of people just hate hearing this. So, I don't want to get any more enemies than I've already got out there. But I would just caution people to sort of rethink that approach, that, everything is going to be so hunky-dory just because you ascend. Work is work. And you do work here on this dimension if you came in as a being. And if you were indeed ready to ascend when you left this incarnation, whether you leave in this body or another, or your light body or whatever, through supposed, the old-fashioned way of dying, then, it doesn't really matter. You're still going to be doing service. It's going to be in, whether it's to this earth or another dimension or another earth or other beings or whatever. I think that thinking it's a big difference is kind of a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking it's the ideal heaven with your feet up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm hearing you.
It's not like that. So, you got to get over it.
Okay, so look, we've got thousands of people are calling in right now in concurrency. Look, we really like to. We struck a chord with the Hollow Moon, the Hollow Earth, and everyone's calling in for that. So look, what I'd like to say is, guys, just try and hold off for the last maybe another 15 minutes or so. Let's get some more questions out of, some more information from Kerry. Yeah. Let her talk about a bit more before we go into that. We just have one more caller before. I'm not going to hang you up. I'm going to let you ask your call, and then I'll hang you up, and so we're free. And go ahead, caller.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air.
Hi. I wanted to ask if aliens are real.
Fair question.
That's a fair question.
Jared?
And what's your name?
My name is Fernando.
Thank you, Fernando. I'll hang you up, but you'll get to hear Kerry's question. Thank you.
And I also wanted to ask, where are they at? Are they in space around Earth, or are they here on Earth? And
Yes.
what kind? Like how do they look, and what are they doing, and what do they want?
That's a very broad
Those are
question.
That's
there's
several shows, in fact. But Carrie, if you can give Fernando a good answer on that one. It's a broad question, but please go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, yes. The answer is yes, yes, and yes. So, but basically, there are all kinds of aliens, as you call them. I would call them, I would call them human beings. In many cases, they're human, and some of them are other kinds of races of beings, the typical grays, some of which are biological. robotic, bio life forms or whatever you want to call them. And some of them are reptilian. Some of them are, I mean, there's so many different kinds of beings. And I would encourage Fernando to, well, you can go down to South America and Mexico and look on the temples, and you'll see reptilian type carvings and beings, and also all kinds of bizarre sort of spaceman looking carvings. You can also look at the Olmecs and look at those huge heads that they've carved, and you can see that they're wearing helmets like spacemen.
Hey, Carrie.
Absolutely.
And
Hello?
and these are visitors to our planet, some
Carrie.
of whom who visited and came to stay. And the
Can you hear
other
me?
answer is yes, they are here among us as well. And we are ETs. So our bloodlines are all ET bloodlines.
Thank you, Fernando.
Hello?
Yes.
Oh, I just want to ask one more thing. Like if you were to be, like just seeing, like, how you see things with your eyes right now, like reality, and you know
Sure.
how you view everything. You see everything with your eyes, how you see it, like with how you see it now, matter and everything. And if you were to see these beings, it would make you realize, it will give you like a different like awareness. Like you'll trip out, like you'll be like, whoa, like how can I say this? I can't explain it. Basically,
I think I know what you mean. It's
You know what I mean? Like,
Well, I mean,
You're
what
seeing
you're
deeper
talking
into
about,
reality.
it depends whether or not they what level they're at. So they could be light beings. You can also see them with what's called etheric sight, etheric vision. That means that you have your eyes open and you can actually see light. I've developed that ability when I was quite young, using meditation and various other means, and I can see light beings, and I do regularly. Now, there are also posers out there, and there are a lot of entities that pose as light beings, and there are a lot of entities that will put a screen around themselves so that you can't see them. You can only see their sort of the effervescence of them or whatever. So there's a lot of masking going on. There's also a lot of grays that are posing as Pleiadians right now. So, please be aware. And so on and so forth. So, you can also see with your eyes closed. You don't actually see with your eyes, just FYI.
Absolutely. Just like the Matrix again.
Yeah, you can actually see, and you can test it. You can actually see interdimensionally if you close your eyes and get into a certain headspace.
Mm-hmm. So Meki, let's bring it back.
Let's bring it back. Let's bring it back. And we got a couple more questions which we put together. And this is regarding interviews that you had, and one thing that I've had. So
Your audio's bad, man. Your audio's bad.
is it the only thing that different today? Okay, not exactly the same thing.
I know. Look, I'll ask one of the questions that we have. Okay. Kerry, who was your best interview?
Oh God, that's almost impossible to answer. I just have so many interviews that I've really, really loved and thought they were fabulous. I would say one of my favorites is Ashiana Dean. But I would also say, I just love so many of them. They're just awesome. Of course, John Lear is the greatest showman. And he's really, he should be in movies as far as I'm concerned. Same with Bob Dean. Bob Dean is just, a dear man. And my first interview that I did with Bob Dean, I think that's one of the best, the most fun. You really see that what would develop into our relationship over the years, and he's just such a delight. What else? I mean, there's so many fabulous interviewees out there. Henry Deacon, who really never went before my camera, so to speak. We did do a future talk with him at Barcelona, but basically he only then came out under his real name, and prior to that would never go on camera. So I never got to actually sit down and do a one-on-one interview with him. Unfortunately, I would have loved to. He's actually got a delightful personality that people never got to see. There, like I said, there are just so many.
Oh, absolutely. So, Meki, let's just test your audio. You okay? Back again?
I don't know. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, look, it's much better now.
Is that much better? Okay. Look, again, like I said, there's something strange is going on. Sorry, I actually would like to ask you about David Icke, Carrie. David Icke is a guy who's, I think I read him for the first time 10, 12 years ago. And I know you interviewed him. I watched the interview. What did you make of David and what he has to say?
Well, I think David is lovely and brilliant. And his ex-wife Pamela is one of my close friends at one time, and all I can say is David is quite extraordinary. He's a wonderful, dedicated man. He's really sort of what you might say broken his own back to give to the people, and I don't think that people really recognize that that's what he's done. He dedicates everything to the work. And actually that's true of many of the people out there in the sector. A lot of people kind of go off the deep end talking about ego or this or that with various people. But what they don't realize is these people are dedicating their entire lives to getting the truth out. And that is absolutely, a 24/7 passion of all these people that we're out there with. That includes David Wilcock, Duncan O'Finian, and many others. Now, these people are human, so they have human, whatever you want to call failings or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I have great admiration for David Icke and for many others.
Okay. No, I agree with you.
Oh, your audio is bad again. Yeah, look. Yeah, Meki's a big fan of David Icke, and I've seen not all his videos and not everything, but certainly he puts a convincing argument down. Hey, Kerry, I had a question. Has anyone spoken about, any of your whistleblowers spoken about underground bases on Earth that are military run?
Well, absolutely. In great detail. First of all, Henry Deacon talked about it. So did Jake Simpson. So did John Lear. So did Jan Burish. Mm-hmm. Almost every whistleblower talked about underground bases. Yeah. Rich Dolan and many, many more. So, any
in Australia?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Pine Gap is very, very well known, and actually, it's a lot bigger than people realize. And from what I understand, there are several bases that kind of sort of add on to Pine Gap.
Mm-hmm. I'd heard about one being in Perth as well. In Sydney, not so much. Or around here, I've not been able to see or hear about anything. But there's certainly a military friend of a friend of a friend, certainly. Not willing to talk to me directly, but that they don't want to be identified. But they've said that there is something, that they can't really isolate it yet, so...
Yeah, a lot of activity in Australia, absolutely, mm-hmm. Especially American military in Australia as well.
Agreed. There's a lot going on in the last few months.
Yeah, especially. Australia is in some ways viewed as the Ark of the world because of its ancient archaeology and the fact that it's structurally held together during the last cataclysms. So we have a good friend out there who insists that it's going to be, the last place standing if there's any kind of major earth changes, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know, various celebrities and various military are moving all kinds of stuff there, buying land, et cetera, fortifying them. There are sort of bases there and all this kind of thing.
Absolutely agreed. So, this caller doesn't go away. I have to answer it. I'm sorry, Kerry. I'd just like to ask you. I check the chat for a question for you, Kerry. Okay, while we take this. There we go. That's better. Sorry for everybody. Hello, caller. You're on the air. What would you like to ask Kerry?
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
No, that was me, Dave.
It's just you, is it? Hang on, everybody. Let's check the chat room and make sure we're still live.
I think we are.
Okay, I'm going to hang up on that call.
Kerry, possibly Kerry, are you there?
Yeah, I'll bring Kerry back in. Hang on a second. Kerry, bring you back in. That's better. All right.
Hello?
Yeah, that's better. Sorry, guys. That was
Hey, everybody is back.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was some dead air. Sorry, guys. We're back.
That was my bad.
Thanks for that, Kerry. Sorry, I think we've lost our train of thought, which is probably a perfect time to ask you about Sir Lawrence Gardner.
Okay, so Lawrence Gardner.
Maybe David Hudson. I don't